Hello everyone, today I'm going to be sharing with you my May wrap-up. As per usual, I've got a lot of books to talk about, so let's just jump into the statistics, which I have on this piddly little piece of paper. So in May, like I said, I read 13 books and a grand total of 2,978 pages. As per usual, I don't count audiobook pages towards my total page count. 4 of the books I read were borrowed from my Overdrive app, and 9 of them I already owned. 3 of them were audiobooks, 9 were physical reads, and 1 was an ebook. 5 of them were adult and 8 were young adult. There was 1 1.5-star read, 2 2-stars, 1 3-star, 3 3.5 stars, and 6 4-star reads. 7 of them were part of series and 6 of them were standalones. As far as genres, we had 3 nonfiction books, 1 science fiction book, 3 fantasies, 3 romances, 1 contemporary, and 2 mystery books. And then you guys know I like to go over the years that the different books were released. So we have a 2016, 2010, 1994, 2019, 2019, 2008, 2009, 2016, 1930, 2017, 2019, 2012, and 2013. So, now that all the statistics are out of the way, let's just jump into the books, which I need this for because I wrote them all down on here. Okay, so the first book I'm going to start off with is In Such Good Company by Carol Burnett. This is her memoir that specifically follows her time filming the Carol Burnett show. So I listened to the audiobook of this, which is narrated by Carol Burnett, which was grand. I love listening to memoirs or autobiographies that are actually read by the authors because I think it just adds so much more to the book. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I thought I was going to, because a lot of this, there were many times in this book where she would explain skits, and I feel like the comedy of the skits just didn't translate well into the book as it does like when you're watching it. So some of them was a bit like, I know this is funny because I've watched it, but for some reason it's just not doing it for me right now. So I didn't enjoy those parts of this book so much, but I did really like learning about all of the kind of behind the scenes things and how they brought on certain actors and just funny like bloopers and stuff that she talked about in this book. I thought it was a lot of fun, so I still would super duper recommend this book, but I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I thought I was going to. Then I picked up This Time Together by Carol Burnett, and this is her like memoir that's more about her entire life, and it does go over some of the stuff during the Carol Burnett show, which was almost, I think, exactly the same as what was In Such Good Company, which In Such Good Company would have been written after this one, so I think that some of the stuff in there they probably just took directly out of this memoir, but I still really enjoyed this one as well. Again, I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I thought I was going to. There were some parts where I was a little bit bored with what she was talking about, but for the most part I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot about her life that I didn't know, so again, I would really recommend this if you're a fan of Carol Burnett. I then picked up Dark Apprentice by Kevin J. Anderson. This is volume 2 of the Jedi Academy trilogy. I read the first book in this trilogy last year, and I really enjoyed it. It's very entertaining, so I wanted to finish out the trilogy, even though these are not canon anymore, or I don't even know if they ever were canon, but I'm pretty sure that they were. Basically, in this series, we're following them after the Return of the Jedi, and basically Luke wants to set up a Jedi Academy, so he's trying to seek out people who have the Force, because most of these people he thinks were wiped out by Palpatine, so he's trying to find these people. We're also following this other storyline of like Princess Leia and Han Solo in this universe of Star Wars had twins, and then they also had another son which they named Anakin, and I forget the reasoning, but for some reason they had to be like sent away to another planet and they didn't see them for a really long time, but now the twins were able to come back, and so Leia is trying to like bond with them after not seeing them for such a long time. And yeah, so that's the premise of the first book. This is the second book, and again, I really enjoyed it. It's very entertaining, horribly written, just horribly written, but so entertaining. It's just a lot of fun. It's kind of like reading Star Wars fan fiction in my opinion, and I just really enjoy it. Some of the things that I really loved about this book was that we get to see C-3PO as like a nanny to the children, which is just absolutely hilarious. And there's one part of this book where C-3PO and Chewbacca take the kids to a like virtual zoo, and then they lose them. And watching C-3PO and Chewbacca like frantically running around this place trying to find like 3-year-old kids, it was absolutely hilarious. And then another part I liked in here was Han Solo. Basically in the first book, I don't think anyone's ever gonna read this, so I don't think I have to worry about spoiling it, but basically they Han Solo rescues a kid from the spice mines, and he has like been there his whole life, and he never really got to properly grow up or like have parents or anything like that. So Han Solo has kind of taken him under his wing, and at the beginning of the book the two of them basically go like skiing together, and that was just really fun seeing Han Solo like that. So yeah, like I said, it was just a lot of fun, and it's just kind of like reading fan fiction. I'm also kind of a big fan of the original canon rather than what the story is now, which is an unpopular opinion, but yeah, so I enjoy reading these books, and I am planning on reading the third one. I then read Mirror Mirror by Jen Kalanita. This is the 6th or 7th book in the Twisted Tales series, and I actually did a full review on this book, so I'll leave a link to that up in the eye in the corner if you want to learn more about this book or my thoughts on it, but all I'll say here is that I did really enjoy it. I then picked up Serious Moonlight by Jen Bennett. This is a contemporary romance novel. In this book we follow a girl called Birdie, and basically at the beginning of this book she has a bit of a one-night stand sort of with a boy that she just met and doesn't know anything about, and it ends kind of awkwardly and she's a bit embarrassed about it. And then a couple of weeks later she ends up getting her first ever job working the graveyard shift at a hotel, and one of her coworkers there just so happens to be that boy, so she kind of has to face him every single night. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. I super enjoyed this book. Every book by Jen Bennett I've ever read I have really loved, and I think she has officially become one of my favorite contemporary romance authors, like right up there with Casey West, and you guys know I love Casey West. I really enjoyed all the characters in here. I feel like Jen Bennett writes really real characters, and they don't feel like kind of like cookie cutter contemporary romance characters that you sometimes get. I also love that she has a lot of representation in her books, not just with like race and sexuality, but we also get in this book our main character has narcolepsy, and so does her grandfather, and then the love interest is actually deaf in one ear, I think. So I really liked seeing that kind of representation also. I mean, I can't really speak on whether it's good or not, but I haven't heard anything bad about it, so I enjoyed seeing that in there also. So yeah, I really love this, and I would highly recommend any of her stories. I then picked up The Tales of Beetle the Bard by J.K. Rowling, which I know is a pretty controversial name right now, but I would just like to say that I picked this up secondhand. I've actually never outright bought any J.K. Rowling books. I bought the entire Harry Potter series for $7 at a book sale, which was grand. So yeah, I read this, I picked it up like a year ago, finally got around to reading it, and I half really enjoyed this and I half really hated this book. I basically loved all of the stories. I thought that they were a lot of fun, and I could totally see myself reading these stories to like my future children before they go to bed. However, in between every story, or like after every story, there was this commentary from Dumbledore, which I just did not care about at all, and I absolutely hated that. I just wanted to read the stories. I didn't care to hear Dumbledore's opinion. So yeah, I really enjoyed half of this book, and then I really didn't like the other half, so do with that what you will. I then picked up Along for the Ride by Sarah Dessen. This is a YA contemporary novel. In this book we follow Auden, and she ends up spending the summer before like going off to college. She spends the summer with her father and his like new wife and their new baby that's like just been born like 2 days before she gets there. And basically it's a story of her just kind of discovering herself. That's how I would describe this book. She has a lot of trouble ever since her parents divorced. She's had a lot of trouble sleeping, so she tends to just be awake all night, and she ends up bonding with a boy there who also is awake all night. So yeah, I went into this book thinking it was a romance, because that's just what I got from the cover and kind of from the synopsis also. I mean, I guess the synopsis directs it more towards the fact that it's more of like a self-discovery story for her, but I really thought that this would be a romance, and it just really isn't. Just the romance aspects of this book are few and far between, and when they are present in this book, they're just not good. Like, the two love interest characters, in my opinion, didn't have any chemistry, and I would have been far happier with the ending if they would have just ended up as friends. So yeah, maybe that's probably my bad for going into this book assuming it would be a romance, but on top of that, I also just didn't like this book because I just didn't think it was that good. Like, forget the fact that it wasn't what I expected it to be, it just isn't really that good. All of the characters are borderline horrible, and the only good character is like her stepmom, which our main character continuously throughout the book just complains about how annoying her stepmom is and like overcomplicates things. And like finally towards the end she does like, you know, she has her like self-discovery where she realizes that her stepmom isn't that awful, but literally her parents in this book, horrible. The main character, kind of really judgmental. The friend characters were okay. I didn't care about the love interest at all. He was super bland and boring. It just wasn't a good book all around, and I can't say that I would recommend it. I then picked up Alice Through the Looking Glass. This is a novelization of the live-action movie, and I don't have a lot to say about this except that I really enjoyed it. I'm a really big fan of the movie, so I was happy to read the book, and it also has some great illustrations in it. That one there. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. The writing isn't overly great, like it's just kind of average, but it wasn't like horrible by any means. It's just very simple. It's kind of written like a children's book. I don't know, I can categorize it as young adult, but it's probably closer to a middle grade, honestly. But yeah, I just really enjoyed this story, so I really enjoyed this book, and it definitely put me in the mood to watch the movie again. I then read the ebook for The Companion by Agatha Christie. This was just a short little mystery story, so again, I don't have a lot to say about it, but I thought that it was pretty good. Agatha Christie is a very good writer, so overall I really enjoyed this. I then listened to the audiobook for The Order of Time, which this is a book that I just should never have picked up. I should have read the synopsis and known that this book wasn't going to be for me and then not picked it up. But instead I saw that the audiobook was narrated by Benedict Cumberbatch, and I just started listening to it because I love him. So this book is basically about time and how much we don't understand it and all that jazz, and honestly it started off pretty good. Like I was learning things that were blowing my mind. I didn't know about them before, but then the book went swiftly downhill. And I did read this opinion on Goodreads a lot also, so I know it's not just completely me being stupid, but the author tended to be kind of waffly. Like we would have a point that he was trying to make, but then he would kind of go off on these little tangents and just waffle on. And there were also a lot of footnotes, which I do not like footnotes even when I'm reading a book, but in an audiobook I feel like they're even more like distracting and confusing for me. He would have a point that he was making, he would go off on like little waffly tangents, and once we finally like got back on track with what he was talking about, I forgot what the point was. So it was just kind of really confusing. So yeah, I should have just known that this wasn't a book for me. Like I should have known that like a sciencey book about time would have gone completely over my head. But I just wanted to listen to Benedict Cumberbatch, and so I enjoyed that part of the story. And like I said, I did enjoy the beginning. There were a lot of facts I didn't know about, and they blew my mind. It was great. Can't say I enjoyed the second or third part of the book, so that's that. And then picked up A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is a young adult mystery novel. In this book, basically, I think it's 5 years earlier, there was a high school student called Andy who went missing, and she was missing at this point for such a long time that she's basically just been presumed dead, even though they never actually found her body. And her boyfriend at the time basically took the fall for it. Like everyone thought that he was guilty, but he killed himself before he was ever convicted of the murder. But everyone in this town just like knows it was him, and they're adamant that it was him. So 5 years after that, we're following a girl called Pippa, I think her name was, and she is a high school student now who is doing like a research assignment paper, I don't really know, on this case because she is trying to prove that the boyfriend was actually innocent and clear his name. So I really liked the premise of this book. I just don't feel like it was executed very well. The best way I can describe this book is like Nancy Drew, but with sex, drugs, and swearing. So basically what I mean by that is that the kind of crime-solving tactics that our main character has, to me, are just not realistic. And like when I love Nancy Drew, so nothing against Nancy Drew, but rereading Nancy Drew as an adult, I can see how like unrealistic it was, some of the things that she was doing. And that's the same in this book, where just like a high school student talking to these adults and getting this kind of information is just not realistic. And that wouldn't have been such a problem if it, like Nancy Drew, was like a middle grade or was on the younger side of YA, but like I said, it has all of the sex, the drugs, and the swearing, so it's definitely on the older side of YA, and I would not recommend it for really young readers. But yeah, so I just didn't really like how unrealistic it was. I also feel like this is just borderline problematic. Like our main character put herself in so many situations where she could get herself hurt, and in real life she probably would have. If it wasn't a book, she wouldn't have gotten away with all of the stuff that she did. As far as the mystery, that was the only thing that really kept me going through this book because I did want to find out how it ended. Unfortunately, I did predict the ending, so that was kind of a bust, but yeah, overall, I just didn't really like how unrealistic this book was, so I personally wouldn't recommend it, but I also know that a lot of people did really love this book, so maybe it's just me, so read at your own risk. And then the final two books that I read in May was The Selection and The Elite by Kira Cass. This is actually a reread for me. This is my first time rereading this series since the first time I read it in 2016. So I'm actually planning on doing a whole video discussion on these books. So I'm not going to talk much about my thoughts here, or in fact I'm not going to talk about them at all. But yeah, you can look out for that video in a couple of weeks where I'll be discussing all three of these books, full of spoilers and all of that good stuff. So yeah, those were all of the books that I read in May. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, leave me a comment down below and let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. I'd love to discuss them with you in the comments. And yeah, I'll see you in my next video. Bye!
You hear that, Samson?